The Secret Speech by Nikita Khrushchev was spoken at the 20th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which was held 14 through 25 February 1956. This was a step that entered history as the first step toward de-Stalinization, which intended to destroy the image of the previous dictator, Joseph Stalin. He made him seem as an infallible leader. He intended to revert official policy and change to an idealized Leninist model. During the speech, he recalled Lenin's testament, which was a long-suppressed document in which Vladimir Lenin had warned that Stalin was likely to abuse his power, and then proceeded to cite numerous instances of such excess. He was the first person to officially and publicly denounce his flaws and mistakes, which was a big deal. Among other information, he mentioned Stalin's use of mass terror in the Great Purge of the mid-1930s. During this time, according to Khrushchev, innocent communists had been falsely accused of espionage and sabotage. They were unjustly punished, tortured into making confessions, and oftentimes executed. He also condemned Stalin for attempting to launch a new purge, Doctor's Pilot 1953, and for his policy toward Yugoslavia that resulted in the disjunction of relations between Yugoslavia and the Soviet Union, 1948. Khrushchev confined his indictment of Stalin to abuses of power against the Communist Party and glossed over Stalin's campaigns of mass terror against the general population. He did not object to Stalin's activities before 1934, which included his political struggles against Leon Trotsky, Nikolai Bukharin, and Grigory Zinoviev. He also did not oppose to the campaign that murdered millions of pheasants and had a disastrous effect on Soviet agriculture. Observers outside the Soviet Union have suggested that Khrushchev's primary purpose in making the speech was to consolidate his own position of political leadership by associating himself with reform measures while discrediting his opponents in the Presidium.
The secret speech, although subsequently read to groups of party activists in closed local party meetings, was never made officially public until 1989. It was printed in full in the Soviet Union. Nonetheless, it caused shock and disillusionment throughout the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc, harming Stalin's reputation and the perception of the political system. It also helped give rise to a period of liberalization known as the Khrushchev Thaw, during which censorship policy was less strict, sparking a literary renaissance movement. Thousands of political prisoners were released, and thousands more who had perished during Stalin's reign were officially rehabilitated. The speech also contributed to the revolts that occurred later that year in Poland and Hungary, further weakening the Soviet Union's control over the Soviet bloc, which were the communist nations closely tied with the Soviet Unions, such as Cuba, Hungary, Poland, and East Germany, which were all a part of it, and temporarily strengthening the position of Khrushchev's opponents in the Presidium. Meetings in Georgia, where Stalin was born, members were outraged at the deintegration of Stalin. Some people were killed in the ensuing riots, and trains arrived in Moscow from Tbilisi with their windows smashed. According to the delegates who witnessed the speech, it provoked deep shock among the audience. Many delegates were reportedly crying, others were holding their heads in despair, and several even had heart attacks in the conference hall. Today, Russians remain divided on the legacy of the secret speech. While most communists still view it as an act of treason and say it has done more harm than good, many observers hail it as the beginning of the end of the repressive Stalinist era. Historians had often described Khrushchev as a liberal reformer. They stressed, however, that this liberalism soon showed its limits. Just 9 months later, in November 1956, Soviet tanks were crushing an anti-Soviet uprising in Hungary, killing thousands of protesters.